Let's talk about racism. Yes, I know that it's a sensitive subject, a subject that carries a lot of offense, and many people will try as much as possible to shy away from talking about it. But in my point of view, I think we do need to talk about it, of course, with the purpose of trying to do away with it, eradicating it from our minds, and eventually from our lives. I would like to share with you a little on how the effects of racism got hold of me for many years. I was born and raised in South Africa, a country that was ruled by apartheid. Apartheid being a governing system that segregated blacks and whites. As a little child, I remember growing up in a township. I didn't even question why was it that only blacks would stay in the townships and whites in town. For me, it was just a normal thing. I didn't see anything odd about it until one day I came face to face with racial issues when my mom was attacked by a white man. We were in town, and as children, myself and my brother were playing around in a park without realizing that there was a divider that divided the sides of the blacks from the one of the whites. So we took off and we played all around, and we found ourselves on the wrong side, the side of the whites only. We, Within a few minutes, I think, playing over there, we saw a white man coming towards us with fury. He was just coming as a person who was attacking. And he came towards my mom and started to push her around. It was really terrifying for me to witness as a little child. I couldn't make up of that what was happening. But when we got home, my mom started to explain to us about apartheid, what it was all about, and she explained about the white supremacy, how there is racial divides in our country, and she taught us how to identify the signs, the no black signs, and the whites only. Because when would go to town, there were many of those signs around restricting black people to have a movement in certain areas of the town. Before I could learn to write or to read, I could identify with those signs. I knew how to see those signs. And she also taught us how to speak Afrikaans, which was the ruling party's language. The first words that I learned in Afrikaans was ek is jammer. It was not a greeting word, but it was ek is jammer, so that I can be able to apologize. It means I am sorry. She was just preparing us that if we get into trouble, we may be able to ask for forgiveness. So, with that explanation, I realized that my country was ruled by racism, that there was racial inequality, and it started to bother me. I started to question everything, things that I never questioned before that incident. I started to question now. Why is it that I was born in a black skin? I started to despise that. I despised the fact that I was black and I had kinky hair. I despised the sound of my voice. I remember that I admired everything that had to do with white people, the privileges that they had in the country, the conditions that they lived under. I looked up to them. I admired everything. But beneath that admiration, I know that they lied underneath the fear. I feared to be in the same space with a white person. I looked at them as superior. So all that I thought was that as a black person, I was born to serve under a white person. So every time I see a white person, I wanted to show respect, That's that's how my mind was conditioned. It was not a good feeling because though you admired, though you had that respect, there is a certain resentment that is connected to that. I carried these complexes actually, throughout my upbringing until I became an adult. I remember when I got my first job, it was just after the transitioning period in South Africa when apartheid was being abolished and we were entering the democracy phase. I was the first black woman to work in the company that I was employed in. And I felt that I was privileged to have to work with whites only. The non-whites that were working in my company were either messengers, tea girls, or cleaners. So being the first black woman to occupy the position that I had, I felt so privileged. Though I was still carrying the complexes that I had, I would look at white people with so much fear, and in everything I felt like I needed to serve them. But I got to a point where that now turned to the point where I would translate everything that they do as racism. Any action that they would take, for me, it would be translated as racism, which was not, which was something that really made it hard to work with them. I will give you an example. If a white man will pass me by without greeting, I would translate that as racism. But if it was done by a black man, I would just push it away and not even make a deal out of it. Though I was happy with the job that I had, I was not enjoying it because of the complexes that I had. And the complexes I knew very well that they were because of the effects of racism that I had experienced throughout my life. And I knew deep inside of me that I needed a change. I was happy with what I got, but I was not happy in it. So I needed to change. I needed to make some changes. A penny dropped in my life one day when my boss sent one of my colleagues, a white colleague, to go and get a coffee for every one of us in the office. And I remember that he stood up with so much willingness and pleasure. He was happy. He was even kind to ask each one of us how many sugars we want. And then he went rushing to get the coffee. And what went on in my mind was a change of the way that I had to see things. I started to wonder, what if he had sent me as a black person? What would I have thought? I knew that I was going to think, well, this is racism. Why is he sending me? Does he see me as a tea girl? He's sending me because he thinks that black people are tea girls. That was what was going to go on in my mind. I knew very well. So I started to ponder over that. It helped me to reconstruct my mind, to start evaluating the way that I see things and to have a shift of mind from the way that I saw racism. When I saw my colleague doing that with pleasure, I started to think there must be a way to see things in a constructive way. Because when a person's mind is filled with the thoughts of racism, everything that you see, it's racism. Actually, when we magnify some things in our mind, whatever we magnify, it becomes big. It takes the center stage in our minds and in our hearts, and we get controlled by it. The effects of racism lost control of me when I got to that realization because I was tired of being controlled by it. It was not giving me joy to be among people, some people who were friendly. And every time they become friendly, I would start questioning, why is this person becoming friendly? It's either she's trying to buy me or buy my service as a black person. I really had to shift my focus from racism, and it was a work, an internal work, a work that I myself had to do it in my mind and in my heart. When I started to shift the focus, I was able to think positively about everyone that was around me, no matter the action that would come, that they would have towards me. I stopped translating every little actions as racism. I learned to distinguish ill behavior from racism. I must say that that was a good lesson for me because from then on I I was able to recognize and be able to isolate bad behavior and racism and understand that anyone can have a bad behavior, whether it's a black person or a white person. Anyone can behave bad. And the fact that we cannot be able to control what is happening around us. We cannot be able to control how people act towards us. But we have the choice. We have the power to control what is going on in our mind, how we process how people act towards us. It's in our power. I I got that and I understood it and I changed the way that I thought about racism. I looked at my colleagues in a way that I was refusing to be controlled by racism. Remember, it had controlled me for a long time. It had a hold on me since in my upbringing, knowing that I was tired of being controlled by racism. I decided that I had to reconstruct my mind, the way that I think, the way that I look at others. And from then on, I really had a good relationship with my colleagues. And coming to work started to be a pleasure now instead of just being, a dread. I was no longer dragging myself to come to work. I was coming with pleasure because I knew how to handle now the way that they act. I was enjoying everything, even enjoying their jokes because the issue of racism was no longer in my mind, was no longer polluting my mind. So the truth is to put an end to the issues of racism, it's a decision. And today, I know for a fact that I am comfortable with the color of my skin. I'm happy being a black person, and I'm have embraced my hair, the fact that it's kinky. I love my hair, and I don't have any disputes inside of me when it comes to racial issues. I am free from that. I know how to deal with it. Once we are able to do it, we get transformed. Isn't it what the Bible says? That we are transformed by the renewal of our minds. It is so true. Once we get this transformation, we understand that we can live happily with everyone around us. Racism will never have a hold on us ever.